So you're one of the few Aussies that I know that is not just an investor, but partner in an early stage fund, and in a place that doesn't necessarily have a lot of those.
Yeah, I think there are three of us, maybe. Yeah, Jeremy at Lightspeed, Jeremy at Spark, and
non-Jeremy.
And then non-Jeremy. Yeah, I'll take non-Jeremy.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Zetta.
So Zetta is the fund that we got going about 5 years ago now. We were the first fund in the world focused on intelligent systems, so most people call that AI. I don't call it AI because it doesn't mean much, but that's what we did. And it turned out in 2013 that was a good idea in that the timing was right. And since then, all sorts of cool stuff has been developed in that field. And we just aim to invest in the best of that stuff. The best of those companies, the best people working on it.
And to have sort of helped to really start a fund and invest in companies, your career stage is pretty crazy because there's a lot of founders who get an exit and then try and actually cut their teeth in venture, and there's a ratio of those who try versus those who actually do is not particularly attractive.
Yeah, so the story there is I have worked on the other side. I have started a company and sold a company, and started a few, but really I was always an investor. I just started companies opportunistically, to be honest, as in the right people came together at the right time and the right technology wave was happening, and we started something and built something, and it was fun. I view my craft as investing, and a lot of people find that bizarre to think of that as a craft, but it really is for all sorts of reasons I won't go into it. I sort of was that first, and I just did the founder thing because it made sense at the time.
Because we caught up the other day at over coffee, and you were saying that like everyone I think has a kind of weird kid journey, and your one was interesting in the sense that it wasn't just the joy of pulling things apart, which I think a lot of folks who follow an engineering path have, but you actually liked accounting as a child.
Yeah, it's pretty strange. I guess the two things I was peculiarly interested in as a kid was pulling apart computers, and then also pulling apart companies. And what that means is basically getting publicly available information about companies, figuring out what it means, and then investing in them. And they're not interests that have any relation to each other. And so it was very confusing as a kid to reaching the end of high school, for example, trying to figure out what I should do. And so I basically parallel tracked that for a while. As in, I studied some of the investing stuff and law and whatever else, and then I just kept starting little companies or working on little technology projects on the side. And it wasn't until 10 years after that did I finally manage to find a job that combined the two. And I guess the belief there, or like what I've come to learn having observed lots of people's careers and some successful people's careers is, the journey that we're sort of all on that is a really fun one, and it's amazing when you get to some sort of denouement or some realization on that journey that's somewhat conclusive, is to find the thing that you're weirdly interested in that the world also values. And I was weirdly interested in this stuff from a really young age, so I got a bit of a head start in terms of learning about all this stuff. But it wasn't until I later found out and the technology industry developed in a certain way that what I was weirdly interested in became valuable to some part of the world, a tiny part of the world.
And this like interest of getting publicly available information and tearing apart companies, like how old and like is it the way that some kids get excited about different types of train carriers and stuff?
I don't know what that's like. I guess, I was young. I was 10 or 12 or something like that. It probably stemmed from the fact that everyone in my family started a business. And so at the dinner table, we talk about collecting debt and accounting statements and stuff like that.
And I should also clarify, this is a pretty impressive family business growing macadamias.
Yeah,
I think about collecting debt with bikies and leather and
yeah, no. I mean, my dad's name is Tony Fontana, but we have nothing to do with that. Everyone, just for context, everyone in my family runs a business, and they're all different businesses actually. some of my mum's brothers and sisters are in the same business, which is this Australian native nut, macadamia nut, is that business. But they all sort of run all these different businesses. And so, yeah, as a kid, my dad made me invoice for pocket money when I was 5 years old. So I learned how to do.
What were the terms? 90 days or?
Yeah, it was about 9 seconds before I threw a tantrum. He made me prepare little like fake tax returns and stuff like that. So I mean, this stuff in and of itself is meaningless, but it gets you in a very capitalist mindset as a tiny child. And maybe that also has a negative manifestation.
That's so cool. So were you then, like, as getting ready to go into high school? Were you then actually making like little investments based on what you pulled out of these?
Yeah, I was mostly actually making investments in myself and my own things, as in like buying inventory and selling it to people, whether it was buying mini disc players for a hot second and selling in Japan and selling to people in Australia, or whether it was with my brother, or whether it was buying computer infrastructure and then selling it to my dad's friends who needed an internet. That sort of thing. So yeah, it was buying and selling stuff, including stocks as well.
Reminds me of a friend who's a pretty successful entrepreneur here, who, when he was in high school, cut his teeth buying and selling cars.
Yeah. Oh, I did that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny how often you see
never lost money on a car.
Really, that's a pretty incredible track record given how they depreciate.
Yeah, it is, including the stupid cars I buy.
Yeah, that's nice work. Because it's a great influence theory, right?
But yeah, you have. I hope not. I hope they're all still driving. Yeah, I think the process. I don't know that I have that much to say about that. But being aware of the value of money is one thing you learn. Being aware of what it means to you got to have more money out over money in. Trying to actually internalize what it means to know something other people don't know. Like, I think I know that this car is worth this, and then so you go and buy it, and then then you go to sell it, and it's not. The market won't pay that, and you lose a heap of money, and you realize you feel that you were wrong. Like, you get this somatic sense of what it feels like to be completely wrong and be called on your BS, basically. And that somatic sense of being wrong actually helps you learn the lesson of, okay, what analysis did I do that was bad, or whatever else. And this is the great thing about investing as an intellectual discipline, is there's always a weighing machine, and there's a very objective right and wrong. It's the market. And so I think you can learn those lessons, or I think that you learn lessons best when they're accompanied with a feeling or an emotion, and losing money happens to be a bit emotional.
Yeah. So you've sort of gone through high school and you ended up going on more of the business track at uni, even though you were loving pulling apart the technology and working out how things work. How did you find yourself doing an exchange in New York?
So I was starting all these little computer businesses, and then I sort of didn't really have any friends doing that in Australia, to be honest. And my parents didn't have any friends doing that. I didn't know anyone doing that. And then I happened to go on a trip to the US, and then I happened to go out with someone from the US for a while. His family were very entrepreneurial. And I started to realize that there were a lot of people over there doing this sort of thing. And I was reading magazines and books and whatever else about the very early sort of internet boom, Microsoft and all that sort of stuff. And so I just sort of thought that this is where it was, and then I applied for an exchange, and I went to came to study over here, and then it was just incredibly obvious. And I was only in New York for 6 months, and I started 2 companies, and they didn't go anywhere. But I started 2 companies, and I started this investment fund at the same time. And so to start 3 things in 6 months, you sort of it really entrenches your belief that, okay, this is where I can come to start things, and that's what it was.
So, I can't remember, did you go back to Oz after you?
Yeah, I went back for 2 years. Yeah, that was not fun. Because I got all this stuff started, and then I had to go home.
Yeah,
and I made all these
degrees, like you ran out of.
Yeah, I wanted to come back and finish my degree and do a bunch of other things, have some fun, but you start all these things, and more importantly, I made all these friends, these amazing connections as friends and as like potential business partners and all this sort of stuff. And then I had to just leave them for a while. And so it was really hard for those 2 years I went back to sort of maintain that. But I put the effort in, and when I came back to New York 2 years later, there was still sort of warm enough that I was able to jump back into it. But it was hard to go back.
And what brought you back a couple of years later?
It was a complete fluke. I mean, I knew that once I finished university in Australia, I wanted to come back to the States, but I did not have a plan. And in the absence of my friend just giving me a job, I probably would have just moved here and seen what was going to happen or something like that. I probably just would have stayed here until someone gave me a job. But yeah, just randomly, I was talking to a friend, and he was a mentor for me when I did an internship when I was 18, and then he moved over here and blah, blah, blah. Fast forward, he gave me a job. And so I did that job for a year, but then I got the urge to start a business again. And so I started a business in New York, and then long story, but we ran that for about 18 months. In the process of doing that, we moved to San Francisco, and then we sold that. And through that, like that whole sort of cradle to grave experience with the startup here between New York and San Francisco, I met a lot of people, and we did the right thing by the people that were involved in that business. And so when that ended, they started doing favors for us, and that's when it all sort of started blossoming. And that was the definitive turning point in my career. Like, people try to tell their stories linearly, and so they make sense. And I'm making absolutely no sense until this point. But the reality is, you really have, in my experience and in the as far as my observations go with other people, there are one or two things that happen in your life that really catapult you in a certain direction, usually, hopefully a positive one. And we all have the negatives as well, but it's just one or two things. And for me, that was it. It was just getting that first win on the board. And it wasn't massive. We didn't sell the company for $1 billion, but getting that first win on the board gave me just enough credibility that I could start getting certain meetings and certain opportunities would start coming my way and whatever else.
Given we're the Aussie Founders Network, it'd be great to sort of share a few of the insights, even though it was an 18-month journey with a good exit. So I'm sure there was lots of craziness during that period, of some lessons learned and some insights as a founder in that phase. Is there any that stand out? Because you guys started it on one coast, built it out here, connected teams from other places. Like, it seemed like a pretty wild ride.
Yeah, it was. Here,
worth explaining what it was too.
Oh yeah, so we made software that allowed massive travel companies with loyalty programs like United, Hilton, Virgin, these were all customers of ours, get all of their data and combine it with all this data that was coming online from social networks, so from Facebook and Twitter and all these places, and then figure out how to market to people at like a very personalized level. And so we built a product that started doing that. It was essentially an early big data company. One lesson, the first one that comes to mind, which is not the most important one, but it's for me it was an important one because I had completely written off the value of this thing before that, which is PR. Like, I have a co-founder that was incredible at PR. He had no background in it, but he was just very good at it. He had a knack for like building relationships with journalists and coming up with good stories and whatever else. And like, if I am completely honest, the biggest lever in getting acquired was we had some really interesting PR that got in the right people's ears at the right time. And it was a big lever in fundraising, it was a big lever. So don't undervalue PR, even as a tiny company. And I've lived this lesson dozens and dozens of times over again, being on the board of companies that are early stage and founders, technical or otherwise, just completely ignore the value of PR. And they suffer for it, a couple of years in. So that was one. Another one is, bringing people over from Australia can be a very, very smart thing to do in the early stages of the company's life, because you can bring a group of people over together, they know each other, they have great communication with each other. They're all like on this journey of not only starting a company together, but moving to another country together. They're probably smarter than the people you can, or higher quality, I should say, than the people you could hire locally because your relationship with them or whatever else. And so we did that. We hired our entire team from Australia, actually. One co-founder was not from Australia, poor guy. But the rest of us were, and I brought them all over, and that was a great thing. Like, we really were so much closer as a result of having that distributor. And that made a difference when times weren't so good. So that was another thing, like if you can sort of bring people from one place with a shared history, it'll help you get through things that you're not predicting. And finally, I guess the simplest advice is always the best. So when you start a company, there'll be a lot of people around you giving advice. You'll give some of those people shares. They'll be called advisors, and they'll feel like they have to prove their value by giving you lots of advice. Really, the best advice we ever got throughout the entire company's life was one sentence advice from one person. It was Peter Thiel, who was our board member and main investor. And he's an incredibly smart person, like top 3 smartest people I've ever met. But when we were getting acquired, there are all sorts of things that are happening when you're getting acquired, and all sorts of different parties involved and different emails flying around and things you have to get exactly right. And his one piece of advice was don't be desperate. Like the minute you show any sign of desperation, you're dead. The whole process is dead. And he could have said a million things throughout that process, but he just kept repeating the same message over and over and over again. And when you have a really smart person repeating the same message, and it's very, very straightforward, don't try to break it down any more than that. Like just listen to them. And I try to do this as a board member now. I have a rule where I don't say more than one sentence per hour, basically, in a board meeting, which is quite different. Quite different to a lot of other venture capitalist approach on boards. And I try to just pick the one thing to say and repeat it over and over and over again. And I think if you have someone who's thoughtful enough to be restrained enough to do that and has some experience behind them, whatever else, like listen to them rather than listening to the people that are changing their mind and giving you all sorts of advice all the time. Anyway, it sounds dumb, but it's a good heuristic for figuring out which advice to accept.
Interesting. So you guys built up this engine. Travel's a tough market.
It's terrible.
Yeah. And it's sexy though. I mean, the PR stuff's probably helped by the fact that the content.
Everyone loves to travel.
Yeah, everyone loves to travel. So anyway, you've got this exit, and as you said, you looked after the investors who led your seed round, because I guess when it's one of those earlier exits, there's some tension about do we maximise, sort of earn out and have more of the founders get rewarded at the expense of the people on the cap table. You guys did the right thing by your investors, and so at that point, you really felt things change. You just people calling and emailing, and it was you were sort of a made man in a sense.
Maybe made enough. There's a lesson there. I'm trying to sort of turn these questions into lessons that may be generally applicable rather than talk about myself. The lesson there is no funny business. You will completely destroy your career if you do something that treats someone unfairly, and I see the other side of this as an investor all day long. People in moments where a lot of money's at stake, or someone's career's at stake, or that are just tough, like something's shutting down or whatever, people get scared, and when they get scared, they operate from a position of fear, and they might take care of themselves over someone else, or they might get selfish or something like that. Just fight all urges to do anything like that, and just always think that life is long and treat everyone as best as you possibly can, whether it's shutting down a company or otherwise. Just be a good person, because the minute you do anything that's slightly off, someone important will notice, and it's usually the most important, experienced, connected people that notice it because they've seen a lot, and they will cut you off. Because we don't need to work with people like that. And we were just very careful not to do stuff like that. There are all sorts of opportunities to take care of yourself over others, and sometimes people never find out, but just don't. Anyway, so not doing that, not doing that worked out for all of us. One of us went to work for Peter in Founders Fund, and has done, my co-founder Jeff, he's done incredibly well. Big first investor and led the Series B at Lyft and Wish and Tilray, and has done super well. And then the other one went to work for Balaji, this amazing company called Council, and then I went to work for Naval, who was one of our investors, and that's when we got AngelList's business off the ground. So AngelList, when I first got involved, was about 1,000 investors, maybe 10,000 users, so startup founders and whatever else. 10,000, couple of thousand companies, 5 people plus the founders. That's what it was. So today, I mean, there are all sorts of great stats I can pull out on AngelList, but manage a couple $1 billion on AngelList, $1 billion of other funds. I think over 1 million people are finding jobs on AngelList every year. They're involved in half of all the transactions in Silicon Valley. There are lots of numbers I can sort of give you guys, but that team has done such an incredible job of building the place you go when you need connections to start a company, basically.
And so you joined when it was a small team, and I think in the early days, if I recall, like AngelList turned out to be a fantastic name, but it wasn't necessarily, it was more like the mailing list, the newsletter.
Yeah, it was.
Right?
It was like newsletter.
Yeah, as opposed to a list of angels that you can sort of connect with. What was the sort of recognition? How did they become, sort of have $1 billion worth of funds as effectively a loose connection of syndicated people?
Well, I just sort of walked in the door and saw all these people connecting on AngelList and doing all these deals, and I thought it was crazy that we weren't making any money. So it just sort of goes back to this like little capitalist that I developed into, and I thought it was crazy. And so I got together with another engineer there, and we built some products that allowed people to actually do transactions online. So do sort of more complicated private equity investments online, and then we set up a bunch of fund administration stuff in Utah, and then we just like started convincing people like, hey, instead of managing all these investors in your company offline, start doing it online. It's quicker, it's cheaper, it's whatever. You might get access to different sorts of people, and we just sort of gradually convinced more and more people to do it, and then we were sort of moving investing online was one thing. And then I'll never forget the day Naval came into the office and he's like, why are we getting all these groups together? Why don't we just let other people get groups together to invest in a company? So the first iteration was AngelList would send out a company to all the angels on AngelList and say, if you want to invest, click this button. And he said, well, why don't we just let anyone send out any company? And that was syndicates. And that's what really caused it to blow up. And that was a genius idea. And he walked in and he said, this is what I want to do. And then he said, okay, you do it. And then so we did it. And that's how it developed into what it is now.
That's awesome. So how long have you spent at AngelList?
Only a couple of years, like 3 years.
3 years. That's cool. But a lot of transition in 3 years.
Yeah, we went from nothing to something. Yeah, it was good.
Understatement of the night. So you sort of done that adventure, and then what was sort of the transition point for you to be starting to lean into something like Zetta?
It was complete luck. In the middle of 2014, AngelList, people started recognizing AngelList. So founders always knew AngelList was pretty useful. Angel investors, other little investors always thought it was useful, but Sandhill Road, like the traditional VC funds, just ignored it. They just wanted to ignore it because it was a threat to their business, of course. And for whatever reason, had other things to do, just ignored it. It was around 2013, 2014, people started taking notice of it. And bizarrely, in the middle of 2014, in 1 week, I had a bunch of different funds contact me completely cold and say, well, do you want to come to our fund and like invest for us? And I wasn't really interested in it, but when you get that many people contact you all at once, like the universe is trying to tell you something in a weird way. So I followed through on that, and anyway, it led to this sort of period of introspection, which I won't bore you with, but going back to something I said maybe 15 minutes ago, I realized what I was actually able to do that was valuable. And what I was able to do is, at AngelList, I was sort of a product manager, I was sort of an investment manager, I was sort of a founder of a new business. But I'm not that good at product management. And I'm really not that good at operating in that environment. But what I really like is investing. So I thought, well, why don't I just go and invest? And I happened to meet someone who had an incredible track record, had fun going, all that sort of stuff. And we just gelled from day one, mostly around the idea behind the fund, this whole focus on AI. And he had got it going, but hadn't launched it. And then we joined up and we launched it, and then it is what it is now.
And so Zetta doesn't try and have the profile that some of these VC firms have. You guys are a lot smaller and a lot less interested in probably getting the attention. You guys have backed some pretty well-known companies. Who are some of the, I was reading through, is like, first one you did Canva, there's a few others, right?
Oh, Canva was a personal investment. So
right.
yeah, that was my very first angel investment was in an Aussie company called Canva, who are doing great. So I'm really happy to have met them very early on. And there's a whole other lesson there. But the companies we backed at Zetta, Aussie company called Kaggle, was the biggest data science machine learning platform in the world. We were the biggest investors. We sold that to Google. Domo, which went public last year. We were the first, you can say what you want about Domo, but we were the first $1 million in the company. My partner Mark was, I should say. And then what is now Google Cloud, so the whole Google Cloud business sort of morphed into that after they bought this company called Bebop. We were the first investors in that company. Clearbit is probably a company that a lot of you guys use. We're the biggest investors in that company. Domino Data Lab is probably the biggest sort of data science collaboration tool. We're the first investors in that company. Anyway, there's a bunch of cool companies that we're lucky enough to work for. I guess like there's what we're most proud of is how we specifically help them because we stay focused on something and we just have this attitude of working for them, and it's not about us creating some portfolio that we can then market to LPs and then raise more funds and then blah 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 get bigger and bigger and bigger. Like what we actually care about is the craft of investing and of building this new type of company. And we think, to your point about your very accurate observation that we don't make a lot of noise, what we actually care about is creating a whole new way of investing to suit this whole new era of companies.
It's interesting you say we've been lucky enough to work for, because every other time I hear an investor speak, they talk about work with or invest in.
They say my company.
Yeah, well, that one too. But
yeah, it's bizarre because no VC is a majority investor.
No. It's interesting that you guys think of it as working for. You guys pick an interesting kind of stage or phase too, because there's plenty of like angel and sort of that seed money approach to do a first mill, and then there's a big gap, that sort of valley of death of sorts. You guys sort of went straight for the middle of that, right?
Yeah. So on the whole work for thing, without getting all Noam Chomsky on everyone, like your language forms your thoughts, and you've got to be super careful about your language. And we write down our vocabulary that we use and words we don't use. And of course, we're not perfect. Of course, we all slip up here and there. But I'd strongly encourage everyone, whether you're at a startup or whether you're an investor or whoever, like really think about the terms you use in your business and what they mean. And a really simple one to talk about is users. A lot of people who build products for people call the people that use those products users. And that is often quite inaccurate because sometimes there's people using your products that are paying you. So they're a customer and you have to serve that. And the implied in using the customer is serving someone. Anyway, there are many, many examples I can bring up, but just to sort of pick on that, what I've found incredibly useful both for us and also and our culture, but also for the companies where I serve as a board member, is thinking very carefully about the terminology you use. And maybe this is the lawyer in me or something, but it does have a practical effect. Anyway, to your point about the stage of the market we operate at, it's a little bit of inside baseball, VC stuff, but I guess one of the benefits of working at AngelList was that I saw where I got a good view of the entire VC ecosystem because we saw so much. We saw all the term sheets for all the deals all the time. And so you saw, and you could track, and we had some of that data is structured data, and you could track all sorts of interesting things, like very simple stuff like valuation, or very, discrete stuff like valuation, but also other things like what terms and what firms were actually getting the good stuff and what firms were missing out and who was winning and losing. And what I noticed was that there was this big gap, and that the bigger funds were getting bigger, and there was sort of a bit of a Matthew effect going on there, like rich get richer, and then all these angels were popping up because all these tech companies were becoming quite successful and exiting, and people had some money and they started angel investing, and that just left this huge gap in the middle, which is, it was pretty easy to raise a couple $100K and build a product and whatever else. And then the next step after that was, I have to be earning $1 million in revenue for anyone on Sand Hill Road to pay attention to me. And the point is, there's an intermediate step there, which is after you build a product, you've got to sell the thing, and to hire salespeople, you need to pay them money, and then they will then sell enough, hopefully, to get you enough revenue you can get to the next stage. So that's what we do.
And so that sort of 2 mil round size, which I think there is a bit of a sort of inside baseball piece, but I think for this crowd in particular is pretty relevant to know. Like when we were looking to raise back in 2014, late 2014. We got to the mill of revenue, which I thought was the ticket to ride, or at least get into the arena. And in the couple of years that we've been getting to that point, the goalposts have moved somewhat because the funds that were previously writing sort of 4 mil checks, which would have been sort of right in that neighborhood for us, 3 to 4. They had raised twice as big a fund because interest rates are what they are, and there's lots more money flooding in. So they just doubled their fund size, which meant they ended up doubling the check size because they didn't want to double the number of deals because that means working harder. So they were like, all of a sudden now it was an 8 mil check, and you've got to have a bit more ARR than that to be able to get into that game. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think there are 2 lessons there for founders. One is don't read blog posts. If you think about what someone's trying to do when they write a little post on Medium, is they're trying to get attention. And the way you get attention is by giving someone something that's very easy for them to digest. It's brain sugar, right? It's like something that's very easy to digest that gets you really excited. And if you're trying to get the attention of founders, you write a blog post that says something like, if you do this, it'll lead to that. And that's okay, that's cool. That's what I want to hear right now. So there are a lot of people that write blog posts that are if you get to $1 million ARR, you will get this round done. So just if you think in the second order about all this content flying around, think about why people are writing this, and they're not really writing this for the right reasons. And so most of it is really not informative or useful for you to know. So that's one lesson, is ignore sort of all the benchmarks that are put out there. The second lesson is really try to aggressively screen investors. And this is so counterintuitive, because if you're a founder that needs money to keep your business alive, you want to maximize your pipeline of people that have money that could invest in your company. And so you want to meet as many investors as possible. That's not the right approach, because a whole bunch of them just are not incentivized, as you point out, because of their fund size or some other reason, because of the area of focus. If you come to me and your company has no sort of machine learning technology whatsoever, I'm just not ever going to work with you. So whether it's for whatever reason, everyone has their thing that they do, and just screen aggressively for that. And so in the first meeting, put them on the back foot and say, what do you do? What are you looking for right now? This is just good sales, really. Understand them, and if they're not a fit, just walk out. It's not worth your time. You can be spending that time selling or building or meeting an investor that actually has some hope of investing in you. Again, it's so counterintuitive. It's so hard to look a gift horse in the mouth, so to speak, or whatever the idiom is. But aggressively screening investors down to just the ones that are relevant to you will make fundraising so much easier.
It's really interesting. So you guys are now, what are you on you're on your second fund now? And what are some of your perspectives that you've been able to glean, not just from the AngelList experience, which was a huge amount of volume, but now it's less volume but a lot deeper engagement? How I guess, have they changed the insights you had from being in the arena as the founder, and what sorts of insights have you potentially got to share from watching that play out?
Yeah, completely. I was an investor, then a founder, then a hybrid, then an investor. So I learned a whole bunch of stuff early in my career, and I sort of relearned some of that. And I'm trying to think of the ones that are relevant to founders. I think a lot of boards are sort of something that a lot of people don't like, as in like very early stage companies try to avoid forming a board. I think that's a huge mistake most of the time. So something I've learned, to frame it positively, is that if you have an amazing relationship with a board member early in your company's life, and that board member is not only personally connected to you and like bonded to you, but has a very strong incentive to actually help you, as in they've put a lot of skin in the game, that can just make or break your company. As in, if it's bad, they can do things that are not nice, and if it's really good, they will work so hard for you. They will be there 24/7. They will put their network on the line, their reputation on the line for you, and whatever else. And I think, again, in an age where there's just so much money floating around, it's very easy to just like accept an investment from someone where they are just going to be quiet. And that has its virtues. In some cases, that might be the right answer. But most of the time, when you're in the phase of like trying to figure stuff out, like trying to find product market fit, that's not going to. You need more than that. You need a team around you. So just forming that team early on, I've learned that's really important. Something I was super antagonistic towards really early on, that I've learned over the course of being involved in dozens of companies and on quite a few boards, is get a coach. Get someone. The most dangerous people in the world are the people that don't know themselves. And it's very hard to know yourself. And there are lots of things you can do to get to know yourself. You can sit on the floor in a forest 5 hours a week or a day, or you can do all sorts of things. You can have really good peer groups. But one thing you can do to get to know yourself is get a coach, someone who is you got to incentivize in the right way, but someone who's like relatively objective. I used to think that was a bit silly, but I've seen time and time again founders get so stuck in their a model running in their head, and they don't pull themselves out of that. And the model running in their head could be something like a certain thing that they get Steve Jobs syndrome. They're like, I'm totally right about this product idea or this or that. And sometimes you need someone outside of your company to tell you that. So that's something I've learned recently that's really important. And then a super boring one is get the right accountant early on and the right lawyer. Again, it's just that, look, it sounds dumb, it sounds boring. It's like, of course you would do that, but like people don't spend money on that early on. And I see so many founders be so tight with lawyers early on, and this is wrong. This is always comes to bite you. Anyway, I've got lots of others, but they're the ones I've learned most recently.
The fresh ones.
Yeah.
Turning our minds to, I guess, the Australian angle, because it's, Aussie Founders Network in Australia Day soon. Have you got any tips or observations that are based on sort of our shared experiences that you think are really relevant?
Yeah, learn how to network like an American, basically. When I have a friend come over here, the first thing I tell them is, okay, I'll help you find a job, I'll get you a job, but the thing you have to do in return is you have to have 100 coffees in the first month. And they're like, 100, how do I do that, whatever. I'm like, I don't care how you do it, just do it. And just hit the number. It doesn't matter who it's with, just hit the number. And then once they've done that, and then I say, okay, so what's your brand now? So thinking about your own personal brand, thinking about your marketing strategy, your content strategy, how you present, what your story is on your resume, all that sort of stuff. Like, think about your brand. That's like month 2. And then month 3, it's usually when they're like starting to actually consider opportunities, and they're thinking, oh, I want to work at this cool startup. And a lot of people are like, there's this selection bias where like you come to Silicon Valley because you want to work at a startup, but actually working at a tiny startup is usually the wrong answer. If only from a networking perspective. You will just not meet that many people, to be honest, unless you're in a sales role or something like that, or unless you're a prolific networker. But working at a bigger company earlier on can be completely life-changing. It can be life-changing for your brand. No American has any idea of the universities in Australia. So month one, have 100 coffees. Month two, actually think about your story and your brand and like get that elevator pitch down, get your LinkedIn resume making sense together, whatever. Month three, like really optimize for network in your first job. And then after you've got that first job, the bit of advice I give them then, or like my strong suggestion then, is commit for an arbitrary amount of time. As in, do not come here and then like move to New York a couple months later because you feel like partying more, or go back to Australia for a couple of months because like, oh, I still miss it, but I'll be back. Like, just commit for a certain amount of time so that you consolidate the network, consolidate the lessons, and whatever else. And you know, not everyone can commit forever. That's understandable, but like you come here with a goal, and to achieve that goal, you need to stay for a certain amount of time. That goal usually being, I want experience at a world-class technology organization. You're not going to learn, you're not going to achieve that goal unless you're here for a set period of time. And then after that, like once you've committed for a certain amount of time, actually invest in your community. So, and this is community at work, but also outside of work. So don't just be here and leave every weekend to go somewhere cool or whatever else. Like, stay here, build relationships with people here, get involved in some community organization or do something in your environment. Don't just like, you know, work and then sit at home and get Uber Eats or whatever. Don't do that. Like, get out there, do something, and invest in this community. It's what gives back. So, you know, that's how you'll get something back. A lot of people sort of don't do one of those two things at the end, especially.
That's interesting. And it's also interesting thinking back to the, like, personally the times that I've done those things or haven't done those things. Because
I'm not saying I've done all of them.
But it's often so hard when you're like, particularly in the founder journey as opposed to the looking at the job journey. You know, you've got to survive to the next juncture and you know, head down, tail up is often the execution. It could be head down, tail up anywhere in the world though.
Yeah, but investing in your community doesn't mean networking all the time and going to heaps of parties. It means just picking one group and actually building a relationship with them. It means, you know, you'll meet some people in your first couple of months here that are really, really cool or influential or whatever, and, you know, do fun things with them and like do things with them that like genuinely bond you to them, and that'll pay itself off again and again. And it's just like a human thing. Like, you know, if you're going to be part of the city, like, give something to the city.
Any questions for Ash?
Have there been any moments where you've had to change the models you use to invest in companies every day? As in, there are many little sort of sub-models, I guess. Like, the overarching model is we like to find companies that build a competitive advantage through data and compound that with some sort of intelligent system. Okay, great. That doesn't really mean anything in and of itself. So we have all these little sub-models, so little models around like, and when I say models, I mean sometimes I mean mental models, and sometimes I mean, you know, computer models, but mostly mental models. How you value data sets, whatever else, and all the way down to, you know, I have this heuristic that like I want to work for founders that have had a broad experience in the world. They've traveled, they've had different jobs, they've had real jobs, like they've actually, you know, worked on a construction site or in a bar or something. Because they can relate to more people and are more likely to become leaders. So anyway, we've got, you know, our checklists are hundreds and hundreds of lines long, and there are many of them, and we change them all the time. And if you're not constantly revisiting those models, you're probably doing something wrong, or at least like you're not maintaining some semblance of a beginner's mind, so to speak, or an open mind, to put it more simply. And so it changes all the time, and it changes all the time because you either learn a lesson, like you think, oh, I like to work for founders that have this characteristic, and then you work for a founder with that characteristic, and it turns out to be really have a dark side. Or you decide that we like to work for companies that are operating in this niche or have this type of technology, and then all of a sudden Google will release that for free, and so you can't have that as your basis of competitive advantage anymore. So you know, hopefully we're ahead of that, but sometimes we're not, and so you have to completely change how you think about things. So I think someone who's a much more successful investor than I am, Doug Leone, who runs Sequoia, he said to me, and I think he said publicly, every year at Sequoia we change something. And you know, to put this into context, I mean, this is the most successful, if not venture, probably private equity fund of all time. It is an unbelievable organization, and it's really the only venture fund that's consistently been successful. No one has ever lost money investing in Sequoia. It's been around for 34 years. Anyway, I could go on and on about that, but this guy's good, and they don't have to do anything, right, to keep being good, really. But the thing they do to keep being good is they try to break something every year. What advice would you give startups who are trying to raise in Australia? Essentially, I think a few things. One, the venture ecosystem in Australia these days is actually very good. There are investors that know what they're doing with a lot of money. And so that means if you're not able to raise money in Australia, listen to the feedback. They might be right. They might be wrong because it's not the deepest market with the most people and the most perspectives, but it's a very good one. And listen is the first piece of advice to the local investors. The second sort of thing that is true, I think, is that there are, of course, many more investors here that are more specialized in certain areas. So it may be the case that what you're doing is so out there and has a very particular type of risk involved in it that some people in the Australian market just have no experience pricing that risk. So, for example, certain types of risk around semiconductor manufacturing or hardware manufacturing in general, or certain types of like risks around certain biological products and therapeutics. Like there are a lot of people in Australia that are very good at pricing those risks. So you may want to come over here and meet investors that specialize in those areas. So I think that's true. I think the third thing that's also true. So the first thing that's true is that the market is actually very good now. So listen. Second thing that's true is that the market here is much deeper. So if you do have a very peculiar type of company, you might actually find a match here. The third thing that's true is that the process of moving and traveling or whatever else is super expensive from a time and money perspective. And I think most people do it for the wrong reasons. Most people do it just because they want to be here, because they want to move, because they want to change the scenery, because they just broke up with someone in Australia and they want to get out of there. Who knows? But like most people do this when you dig in, like for the wrong reasons. And so just really question your motivations for doing it. And if you can at least raise enough money where you are, I'd be very strongly biased towards just staying where you are and keeping your head down. And we're talking in very, very early days. Like obviously as you progress, you have more options because you've got less risk in the company and more sort of people that can understand it. So I'd be strongly biased against moving. The other reason I'd be strongly biased against moving, particularly San Francisco, is just not a good place to start a company anymore. So that's another conversation. But you want to be moving here for very specific reasons. And I think those reasons are few. Traveling here to raise money, that's a very fruitful thing to do. It's a financial capital as well. But yeah, I probably would move here and start a company.
What other markets in the US should Aussie founders be considering?
I don't know. It depends what you do.
Yeah.
The short answer is, I guess all of them but San Francisco, really. Like it just depends what you do. Like if you're selling a DevOps tool or a computing infrastructure tool or whatever, yeah, of course you should be here because you walk down the street and you get 10 customers. But if you're building manufacturing, a car manufacturing thing, like you shouldn't, analytics product, you shouldn't be here. If you're building fashion company, if you're building a consumer products company, if you're building something to do with mining, whatever, like, there are all these industries involved, you shouldn't be here. These customers aren't here. So yeah, just go where your customers are really. And yeah, some of those cities aren't great to live in, some of them are. You just make it good. Depends how dedicated you are. Describe a moment in your career where you've hit rock bottom and couldn't get out of it. To be really honest with you, I haven't had one, and maybe that's a matter of perspective. Maybe I'm just like naively optimistic about all sorts of stuff. But here's where I'll make a broader point about philosophy. And it's related to the definition of optimism, because, as I just said, for me, I probably have hit moments in my career where things weren't going well, but I just didn't believe they weren't going well. And it's because I'm optimistic, but what does to be optimistic really mean? It means to view, the optimist views life as an endurance sport and like a really long game. And it's all more work. And if you love the work, you just keep doing the work. And if other people are giving you signals that it's not working, if your bank balance is this or that, like if you just love the work, just keep doing it and it'll be fine. Because anything done well enough for a long period of time will be valuable, I think, in a very abstract sense. But that's probably why I've never at least believed, even if it has been the reality, that I have been at a bad point in my career, because I've just stuck to doing the work I like to do, and a lot of good things have come from compounding that, right? So because I chose really early on in my career just to stick to one thing, I now have networks that have just grown by themselves, and I have skills or knowledge that I've built over many, many years, like all this data I've collected on certain companies over many, many years. And at some point that becomes incredibly valuable just because I've done it for longer than anyone else. Like I'm not smarter, I'm not better. Especially in the investing world, like there's some incredibly smart people, but if you just like stick to something for a period of time and just it'll work out. When will it ever make sense to go back to Sydney? Of course, there are a whole bunch of personal factors in play, and not just personal as in like, okay, Australia could be cool place to live for some period of time, but you just might prioritize work growth less and go into sort of a consolidation or compounding phase. That's sort of, as you may have picked up, I sort of view most things as triphasic, like growth, consolidate, compound, whether it's money and wealth, or whether it's friendships, or whether it's your career capital or whatever else. You go through phases, hopefully like just in your 20s, where you grow a lot and you create a lot of options, and then you consolidate on the things that you actually like. So you meet a lot of people traveling in your 20s, and then you realize you only like some of them. And then, because some of them, like all they want to actually do is keep traveling, and you want to live a life. And then once you consolidate that and start investing in those relationships, 10 years later, they're not 10% times 10 better friends. They're 10 times better friends. They're 1,000% better friends, because you have so much shared history and whatever else. And it's the same with money's the easy one, right? That's just an equation everyone understands. But you'll just get to a different phase of your life, probably when you have figured out, reached a level where your skills are sufficiently general that they can apply with different sort of company. So you get to a level in product management where it sort of just becomes management, and then you can, products are products in a way at a certain degree of abstraction, or certain rung on the ladder of abstraction, and so you can just go and manage a completely different type of product, like a consumer product in Australia. So maybe that'll happen. You'll get to that level. Maybe you'll get to a level where you discover something sufficiently hidden in your industry, like some way that people aren't understanding certain threats, certain cybersecurity threats, and you start a company, and you may choose to start that in Sydney. I don't know. There could be many things that happen. I think it's really hard, and I feel where you're at, because, like, frankly, there aren't that many opportunities there, like in our field. There aren't that many companies. The companies that are there don't pay that well, to be honest, and there aren't a lot of people to learn from yet. So I don't know. It just depends how you're prioritizing learning and what degree you're at. The question was about building a culture when you have a distributed team. So I think this question of just culture for distributed teams is one of the most important questions in the technology industry right now, because it's really hard to build teams in places like San Francisco, because technology, collaboration software and whatever else is getting sufficiently good that you can actually build teams all around the world in a distributed fashion. And three, most sort of encouragingly, the technology talent around the world is absolutely incredible. This is a function of online platforms like Khan Academy and whatever else, but it is unbelievable the sort of quality of people you can hire around the world. It just wasn't the case a long time ago. And to sort of give a bit of personal context here, I think 12 out of the last 14 companies we've started working for at Zetta have teams that aren't in the Bay Area. They're all over the place. So anyway, and Angelist, we have a fairly distributed team as well. So what's worked, what hasn't worked, a lot of ink has been spilled on like how to run a distributed team. A couple of things I've learned sitting on the boards of a couple of these companies is one, get everyone together in the same place 3 or 4 times a year. So what you're not spending on salaries, spend on offsites and make them really good and really fun. And like, don't underspend on them early on. To be super thoughtful about the communications infrastructure of your company. So that is have lots of processes around things like, when we have a meeting, how do we document it? What's the minimum required documentation for every meeting? Where is it posted? What are the points that have to be made? What are like the required fields of those meeting notes? When we have an all hands meeting, like how do we have it? What's the question structure? Whatever else. When we hit a certain company milestone, who knows about it? Who doesn't know about it? Who can read whose email? All that sort of stuff. So over-invest in like designing a communications infrastructure and like constantly iterate on like rules for who gets what information. And I think the third thing that's been really important for distributed teams that at least I've worked with is in the early days, at Angelist, Nibby used to say like, name a sports team or a family that's been built in a distributed fashion. And startups sort of like that. Like in the early days, you do need a degree of bandwidth in the conversation, like the back and forth, hey, I was just in the customer side, I heard this, can you build it? Like that sort of really quick, really fat bandwidth and that allows for quick iteration. You need that early on. So I'd say in the early days, like when you're less than 5 people, maybe the rule is like the number of offices should be like n times 5 people or something like that. So first 5 people keep in the same place, then maybe have only one other office with 5. Just try to keep it to only a couple. Don't be fully distributed from day one, because you won't actually form a culture. As much as I believe in distributed work, it's impossible to do super early on before you actually have the core of a culture. I'd probably say like the first 20, try to keep them in the same place, but then like maybe one other office. What's the dream? Just to wake up tomorrow. That's it. No, I'm serious. I mean, when I was a kid, I only thought so far about what's ahead, and I feel like I was naive in thinking that I could plan for anything. But in as much as I did plan when I was a kid, I've executed on that plan. But like, now it's just about waking up and like just pursuing my craft every day, and that'll take many forms in my career, I'm sure. And I'm sure it's the same for all of you. Like if you actually find a thing you love, like a function you like working around, the instantiation of that in the world, like whether it's for me investing, whether it's running a VC fund or buying property in Sydney or selling cars in Florida or starting a biotech incubator in Spain or whatever, like to me it's all investing in a way. And so I don't know, there'll be many instantiations of that, but because if I can just wake up and do that, like, and work with people, then that's enough. That's enough for me. I think my dreams now, like a lot, are very much outside of myself. They've got nothing to do with me. They've got to do with like what would be nice for the world to have. But that's a conversation for afterwards.
Well, afterwards is here. Thank you so much, Ash, for an amazing talk. We have a lot of these fireside chats, and they're always wonderful. Like I've known you for, I don't know, probably 10 years now.
Yeah.
And learned more in the last hour than I did for the previous 9.99 years.
Yeah, that's
awesome. No, it goes both ways, that's for sure. But yeah, great talk, awesome insights, the ability to go from philosophy through to very specific tactical stuff is really special and appreciate it. I'm sure everyone enjoyed it as well. Please express your thanks by putting your hands together.